When reading the works of Inio Asano, there's always been this inherent quality about them that makes me drawn to them so much. Whether would it be in striking narratives, nuanced characters, and relatable themes, all of them just seem to have this engrossing aspect about them tied to their focus on the mundane. Although Japanese media is no stranger to the mundane, but Inyo Asano's depiction of it just fascinates me with how it permeates throughout every aspect of his works. In this video, I just want to dedicate it to that certain depiction of this mundaneness in Inyo Asano's manga and what makes me love it so much. So, with that being said, let's get started with the video. Now, to start, if there was one thing prominent in a lot of Inyo Asano's stories, is that all of them seems to be centered around the more ordinary situations of his characters' lives. Like, despite all the more surreal and darker elements, the storytelling is still grounded in the reality of more typical day to day circumstances, painstakingly illustrated in a lot of his works. Whether would it be in the mere situations of like growing up, being in a relationship, or even just chasing one's dreams, the stories of Inyo Asano just portray them in a manner that touches on the more monotonous aspects of everyday life. Showcased with much depth and realism, not only in the writing itself, but also in the visuals that in which Inyo Asano has always been known for in his manga, where with his stark illustrations of suffocating cityscapes or isolated rural areas, down to the more minute details that clutter the space in which his characters exist in, all in which just further play into his focus on the mundane in his stories, as these situations and settings seems to give this feeling of the cyclical boredom that everyday life can sometimes entail, as shown further with the actual plight of his characters. Speaking of which, when discussing the characters of Inyo Asano, another thing worth mentioning is with the fact that the majority of them being more adolescent in age, focus is then given to the more mundane notions that come with said age. Like whether would it be in the terminally bored teenage hipsters in One Wonderful World, young adults Meiko and Taneda and the struggling bandmates in Solanin, young lovers Komei Sato and Keisuke Isabe in the sleepy seaside town and A Girl on the Shore, all of which are characters that are depicted with a sense of authenticity and nuance as they go through their day to day lives, especially those tied to more coming of age aspects. However, what further interests me is that when compared to most Japanese media, especially in other coming of age stories, is that while those are depicted in a more appreciative sense of the mundane, dating back to the country's cultural roots and values, the works of Inyo Asano instead depict the mundane in a manner wherein leaves his characters in a more resentful state of stagnant boredom, as is based on a more troubling time period in Japan's history, one in which Inyo Asano has stated numerous times to have taken inspiration from. Now, when mentioning this certain time period that Inyo Asano was inspired from, chances are you've heard it before as Japan's lost decade. Now, I feel as though it's important to include this section of the video, as after further research and analysis, it could have been a more fitting thematic foundation for the mundane in the works of Inyo Asano. For you see, during this said lost decade, This was a time where, after Japan's economic crisis in the mid 1990s, it unfortunately affected a number of individuals, especially young graduates, in attaining fulfilling career opportunities in their lives, leaving them to succumb to the duller and more mundane aspects of said lives, wherein the thought of grander narratives are almost as if a distant memory from a younger and more prosperous age. Now, numerous Japanese media ever since the lost decade has since then reflected the societal notions of the time period, and of course, the works of Inio Asano are no different, where with their themes of social stagnation, disillusionment, and just this feeling of being lost in life, all of which just overall depict a certain search for change and meaning that has been long lost in an endless, unchanging, and mundane present. However, now when nearing the end of this video, I don't want to conclude it at all with a more bleak interpretation of Inyo Asano's works. As to me, there is still a profound sense of wisdom and optimism found in his depiction of the mundane. Like in the ending of one of my personal favorite Inyo Asano stories in A Girl on the Shore, Kome Sato states she finally found something she's long been looking for, similar to the start of the manga, and that is the sea. An odd motif at first, but when further looking into it, it's such a fitting idea that seems to encapsulate Inyo Asano's idea of the mundane. Because if the search for change and meaning that his creations longed for tells us anything, is that just like the sea, the search really has no end. It's endless. Where, like life, it truly is a journey without a destination. There will always be a sea of possibilities that one shouldn't lose sight of, as even though when it feels as though the days just go by, Inyo Asano reminds us that one should always be open to finding those moments that can make life worthwhile. Those genuine moments of connection, inspiration, and amazement, which can make our own mundane lives a little more interesting than they were before, even if it were just thanks to some story.